endless in bed? Or have you picked your target yet? Listen, babe. Got your dog bite? Listen, babe.
Oh boy, it is that time again. It is Sunday, September 10th, 2023. You are listening to Online for Maintenance, episode number 31, The Great Blue Meanie. I'm Connor, and as always, this is the official podcast of MMO Fallout. That's mmofallout.com. You can check out my movie review website, How About Notflix, at howaboutnot.com. And of course, we are always making new content at Vidjamagame's Work, or Video Games Work. That's vidjamagames.work. The podcast is brought to you, as always, by our patrons, our loving supporters at patreon.com/MMOFallout. Come check us out for a mere $1 a month, and if you have a few bucks, support whatever the hell this is. But the real supporters of today's podcast are our corporate sponsors, MMO Fallout Consultation Services. And every time I make this joke, it gets a little less sarcastic. So I'm just going to dive right into the pitch. Hey there, folks. Have you ever been sitting in a corporate boardroom for a game developer and thought to yourself, this is a really stupid idea. My boss is going to tank this company. This is a really bad idea. Well, I have just the answer for you. MMO Fallout Consultation Services. That's MMO Fallout Consultation Services. The only consultation services that are only about 50% sarcastic. So you might be asking yourself, Connor, you don't have a business degree. You do not have any experience working in corporate boardrooms for video games or really any other media company. Why should I contract with MMO Fallout Consultation Services? And I will tell you exactly why you should do that. Because we're cheap, and we're also not yes men. What's the value in that? Well, for a mere $100 an hour, billable or payable up front, I will sit in the back of your corporate boardroom and I will say, maybe you should think twice about doing that. Like, let's say your boss comes up and says, hey, we're going to implement a new battle pass. We spent the last year building up customer support and goodwill among our community. We're going to put out a battle pass that completely ruins that. Now, nobody else in the office wants to say, hey, boss, let's, for a completely random example, say, hey, Phil Mansell, this is a really stupid idea, and also you should probably step down from the company before we destroy our business, given our company only has one game. Let's call it RuneScape. And nobody wants to get fired by Phil Mansell. That's where I come in. I'm not an employee of the company. I'm just a contracted consultation expert. Well, expert. I'm just a contracted consultation person. So when I sit in the back and I say, hey, Phil, this is probably a really stupid idea and you might want to rethink it before you roll it out and get your company all over the press for having a bad idea. Then Phil says, Connor, you're fired. And I say, I'm not one of your employees. And then Phil says, actually, you might have a good point. Let's rethink the battle pass for, let's call it RuneScape. And we'll come back to it in the morning. And then the next morning, Phil comes in and he says, hey, I got my coffee and I looked at the battle pass and I realized this is probably going to destroy our goodwill with our customers. Thank you, MMO Fallout Consultation Services. And that's pretty much it. Am I an expert? No. Can I offer the answers? No. But I can sit in the back of the office and for a very small chunk of change say, I don't think this is a really good idea, or maybe you should rethink that. Overloading your store with shovelware? Maybe you shouldn't do that. Working on adding a dating site to your game, probably not a good idea. Taking the fundamentals of your game and throwing them out the window, maybe you should just think about it. Launching a game with a lot of the features gutted and a fully functioning battle pass, I'm just saying the optics might not be great. So consider MMO Fallout consultation services. We're not experts, but we know how to be negative. Now on to the show. So, all of that may seem a little, all of my completely coincidental examples might seem a little bit specifically formulated, and I'm going to get into that. So we do have a couple of things to talk about today, and they all tend to revolve around this whole idea of maybe you shouldn't have done that. Maybe you should have thought about it just a little bit more before you dived headfirst into the shallow end of the pool and broke your neck. Metaphorically speaking, of course. But I wanted to talk about a few really stupid ideas that went through the gaming sphere over the last 2 weeks. And it's a lot easier than trying to use this podcast to catch up on the last 2 years or whatever that I haven't been recording. So we're going to start out, we're going to talk about one of my favorite games of all time, RuneScape. And I say favorite with just a shred of sarcasm. I've played so much RuneScape. I have probably about 7,000 hours in RuneScape. And I've been playing RuneScape since 2004. So I've devoted a lot of my time, a lot of my brain power, a lot of computing power to RuneScape. And I've interviewed the RuneScape devs. I think for the most part, the folks at Jagex on the lower end have their heart in the game. And I'm not talking about the fact that the people in the anti-cheating group kind of tend to get arrested on occasion for embezzling money and real-world trading and dating real money traders and all that shit. I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about the people on the ground floor. The ones who have no choice but to deal with Jagex's increasingly shitty group of investors. Be they ridiculous Chinese capitalists, the Cargill group. And I'm starting to think, with the fact that Jagex has been sold 4 times in the last decade. If you don't remember, we've talked about this before. Pluto Sama is currently suing Jagex on the idea that the sale was fake and that it was a money laundering scheme. And I'm kind of starting to believe it. I'm starting to think that they might have a point, given that Jagex, the revenues increase year over year, and yet the company is constantly getting sold. But that's a different story for another day. RuneScape, if you follow MMO Fallout, you know I like to talk about the Yak Track. And the Yak Track is RuneScape's answer to the Battle Pass. Now, the Battle Pass in RuneScape has had its ups and downs. It's had the Yak Track. It started out as another pass that was so horribly received that Jagex removed it about 2 weeks after it came out. And the Yak Track has had its controversies. It's been slowly losing goodwill with the player base, but they removed the Yak Track and they replaced it with the Hero Pass. And now the Hero Pass is, wow, boy does it have people pissed, because the Hero Pass They include boosters. They include very clearly pay-to-win elements. One of the benefits of the pass is you eventually get charges that can be used to make end-game content less difficult. And in the first battle pass, one of the things that they did was there's a late-game raid that the pass removes. The pass reduces damage taken by 20% for the full run. Just think about that. Imagine if World of Warcraft had a battle pass and one of the benefits was getting a 20% damage reduction across the board in mythic dungeons. Players were pissed. Also, players were pissed because the game gutted daily challenges. There were a bunch of changes for daily challenges, a ton of reductions in rewards for Iron Man players, and I have to assume that the game had a notable increase in people unsubscribing, or at the very least canceling their renewals, because back on September 8th, Jagex put out a release, and they said, we messed up. The launch of the Hero Pass alienated and frustrated many of the community. You've told us, among other things, that it was too pay to win, and you'd lost the important aspect of daily challenges. Now, the update goes into more detail about how Jagex is removing pay to win aspects. They're disabling the purchase of Hero Pass levels. They are disabling the content buffs for Hero Pass. They are removing the experience buffs from the Premier track, which means that free players will still be able to get the XP buffs. And I think at this point in RuneScape 3, nobody really cares about the experience buffs. There's been so many ways to fast track to 99 that I think out of every controversy, this is probably the least of people's worries. So the Premier Pass will only be cosmetics and consumables. Cool. Fine. But the problem here is that the Hero Pass, it wasn't built in a day. That's the easiest way I can think to refer to it. The Hero Pass was not built in a day. It was built over multiple teams, presumably over multiple months. It went through testing, QA, they had meetings about it, they had all kinds of balancing. They put it, they built something, tested it, balanced it, put it back through, had a meeting about it, had another meeting about it. The amount of work and people and oversight and confirmation and approvals and all that other corporate shit that goes into making something like the Hero Pass is immense. Months of work, dozens of people probably involved, a lot of approval, a lot of revisions. So this whole idea that hey, we're sorry about gutting daily challenges. We really didn't want to ruin the experience by gutting daily challenges and screwing over Iron Man accounts. It doesn't hold up because the amount of time and effort that would have gone into making this update, you knew that it was going to happen. There's no way around it. It's like the thing I posted on Twitter about the ball punching machine. You created a machine called the ball punching machine, and now you want us to believe that the fact that it's punching people in the balls was a completely unforeseen result. No. They knew exactly how this would affect Iron Man accounts. They knew exactly how this would affect Dailyscape. They knew exactly how this would affect player behavior, and they did it. And the hope, as it is every time, whenever a developer does something that they know the community is going to hate, the hope is that the people who engage with the content will greatly outnumber, and the people who are pissed off about it enough to actually quit or lower their spending or do something about it will be negligible by comparison. I don't think Jagex expected nearly as many publications to write about this, because, I mean, Jagex has done weird pay-to-win stuff in the past. They've done the Yak Track is something that myself and Massively OP and maybe a couple other MMO websites have written about. But it's something that previously has mostly escaped public scrutiny, because the overall, the meta gaming news tends to not talk about MMOs so much. Unless it's something really big. They really don't tend to focus on certain controversies. So the very clear answer out of it was that Jagex was hoping that the whole thing would just blow over, or that the people freaking out about it would just be toothless and they'd go back to playing the game. And very clearly that hasn't happened. So it's nice to see that they're reversing it now that presumably they don't really have much of a choice. But the point still stands that they built the system that put them in here in the first place. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't like, hey, I accidentally, I put the, I accidentally mixed two ingredients and it ended up in a way that I didn't expect. No, you knew exactly how this was going to turn out. You were just kind of hoping that you could get away with it, because a lot of live services these days are just about figuring out how far you can poke the dog before it bites your hand off, and getting just up to that point. And Jagex figured it out, and they're going to make the revisions. Incidentally, these proposed revisions actually make the Hero Pass less pay to win than the Yak Track, and that's a good thing. It'd be nice if we didn't know in our heart of hearts that Jagex would be, in about 6 months, give it 6 months to maybe a year, they'll be doing the exact same thing. They'll be pushing the limit in another way. Maybe not in the Battle Pass, but they'll figure out another way to push how far they can test the community's patience. And it'll be up to the community to push back. And that's all I can say. You have to push back, especially the whales. You just can't give them an inch. But speaking of pushing things, we're going to go on to the next topic, because I want to talk about the topic of today's episode, which is Tim Sweeney. And Tim Sweeney, before I get into the episode, I'd like to point out that I am not a hater of the Epic Game Store. I don't believe, not only do I believe that the Epic Game Store has a place on the internet, I want the Epic Game Store to become a competitor to Steam. I want Valve to look at Epic and say, hey, maybe we should improve our own store to match what Epic is doing. But Epic hasn't given me any reason to believe that they're really serious about competition, because they have no reviews. It took them years to get a cart system. They have no functioning review system or a useful review system. They have no way to block developers and games on the store from showing up in search results. And Epic is doing exactly what Steam did 5 years ago, and just opening up the floodgates to any dog shit game that wants to be on the service. And that's where we're having a problem. Because the Epic Game Store, people realized over the last few weeks that Epic Games has brought back on Silicon Echo / Zonatron. And if you don't remember who Silicon Echo is, they're a developer who back in 2017 managed to get banned from the Steam store because over the course of like 10 months, they had uploaded somewhere around 200 games, fake games, asset flips, complete garbage. They were lying on the store pages. They were, I think, possibly having fraudulent reviews, but the games were all trash. They had 200 games. Most of them were asset flips. Most of them were clones of the exact same game. They would release part 1, 2, and 3 of a game within the same week, if not the same day. They were basically digital homicide on crack. And Valve banned them. Valve eventually banned them because of the sheer number of complaints from the community and from other developers who were pissed because the sheer amount of games that they were releasing was drowning out the Steam store. And on a store that already has enough problems with visibility, with 40 to 50 games releasing on a good day, it causes a problem. And all of the games are just total shit. Well, Epic Games looked at Zonatron and they said, we'd love to have you on board. And they released 10 games over the course of a few months, and it's all shit. It's actually the same games that they got banned off of Steam for. And people started pointing out to Tim Sweeney on Twitter, and they said, hey, you might want to look into this company, because Zonatron is the type of company that ruins reputations. Because for the fact that Valve actually kicked them off for the reputation risk of being associated with them, with other developers, Epic doesn't have that same Valve could have probably left them on and weathered the storm. I don't think Epic could, because Epic has a hard enough time getting developers on as it is. They're desperate enough for growth that Epic is offering 100% of revenues for 6 months if you remain Epic Game Store exclusive. And I know enough about marketing. I've worked in sales for long enough to know that you don't do that if you're in a strong market position. As much as Epic Games likes to tout their popularity, and most of it comes from Fortnite, we all know how much money that they're spending on getting games, and we all know how much money, hand over fist, the Epic Game Store is losing. So Tim Sweeney comes out on Twitter and defends Zonatron. And he says, are they fun games? The team here looks for that and doesn't go on a hunt to determine what amount of asset packs were used in its creation. And then he says, regarding Valve's criticism of the developers, that's not a factor in our decision making. The EGS team makes their own calls based on the developers' conduct here. Valve's, quote, open store bans a lot of stuff we welcome, like crypto, AI, competing payment processes, etc. Really bad answer, Tim. See, the problem here is that it's not really Valve's criticism. It's a reputational problem of associating with fraudsters. And when you come out to defend fraudsters, it really doesn't look good on you as a company. And when you have the Epic Game Store having all of the problems that it does with actually getting developers on board, you cause a bigger problem when consumers and developers look at your store page and all they see is a deluge of shovelware dog shit. And eventually, Tim got the point. And I know Tim caught the point because very quietly, Zonatron's games were removed from the Epic Game Store. All of them. Completely disappeared. Now, to my knowledge, and this is just looking at Epic and Tim Sweeney's public line of communication, it's never been addressed. They've never explained why the games were removed, who removed the games. For all we know, Silicon Echo could have voluntarily removed the games because they were getting a bunch of public backlash, and presumably being on the Epic Game Store and being shovelware asset flip shit, they weren't getting many sales anyway. But we don't know why the games are off. We just know that they're off. And hopefully all of the backlash around this has told Tim Sweeney maybe you shouldn't be so cavalier about, one, accepting companies that have a bad reputation, and, well, a bad reputation who produce nothing of value, and two, maybe not going to bat for developers when you clearly have no idea what you're talking about. Because Tim very clearly doesn't have much involvement in the day-to-day workings of the Epic Game Store, and why would he? He's the CEO. But to come out publicly and try to refute people's criticism of being like, no, we only accept good, fun games, when that's very clearly not the case. It's very transparent. And hopefully, like I said, when Epic Games said that they were going to start publishing games, I was front and center. I wanted to champion the Epic Game Store. I want something to put Valve's feet to the fire and actually make them improve the Steam Store. Because the Steam Store is total horseshit. It's full of scams, it's full of fraud, it's full of bad actors doing horrible things, and they need someone to hold their feet to the fire. And I believe that out of anyone who's tried to do it in the last few years, that really Epic was the one to do it. But they're taking way too long to improve their practices, and in many cases they're doing exactly what Valve did and making the same screw-ups. And they're going to have to learn the same lessons eventually, but they're going to have to learn it. And I do see a future where Tim Sweeney can make the Epic Game Store into not a pile of shit. But right now it's a pile of shit. And that's the reason why they can't attract developers. They don't have functioning systems. They just a few months ago, or just about a year ago, got functioning achievements. They still don't have a functioning review system. There's no way for consumers to use the onboard system to warn other players about shady behavior. There's no feedback system. There's no forums, no discussion board, no way to share art, no way to share reviews reliably, assuming that the developer opts into it and that you are chosen to do a review, which I should point out just supports the idea that Tim isn't too much against the idea of shady developers doing shady things. There's so much that the Epic Game Store is missing that could make it a viable competitor to Steam, and Sweeney and Epic seem to have absolutely no intention of implementing any of those systems at a reasonable rate. And that's why the Epic Game Store, for now, will never be a reasonable competitor to Steam. But enough about Tim Sweeney. I want to go into our third and possibly final piece of news for today. Editorial piece for today. And that is that Roblox's chief executive at the Roblox Developer Conference, this is David Buzicki. He wants Roblox to become a dating app. I'm pausing for your slight disbelief. Roblox, the game for children and child predators. They want it to become a dating site. Boy, I can't see this going poorly. So Roblox, they had the big Roblox developers conference, and David Baszucki said that in 5 years he could see Roblox having an experience by users who have verified that they are 17 or older, using it as a dating app. Now here's the problem. Roblox is already being used as a dating app. Fortunately, many of the people who are doing that are now behind bars. Roblox, the game, the Lego knockoff for children, should not be having anything related to dating on it anywhere. And I don't say that on the idea that it's a particularly controversial opinion. I think plenty of people will agree with me on that Roblox should not be used as a dating app. Because boy howdy, there's enough pedophiles in the Roblox community as it is. Do you really want them to have an official conduit to get access to children? They're going to have a video chat feature and a dating service. Oh my God. I'm not the kind of person to overreact to stuff on the internet, but Jesus Christ. In what dysfunctioning brain do you look at this and you say, yeah, you know what Hello Kitty Online needs? Dating. You know what I don't know, the Coco Melon game needs? Dating. First of all, and I don't want to make too many blanket statements. I have a question. I have to question the type of person who is an adult playing Roblox, first of all. But the idea of an adult who plays Roblox, who sees another player in the game, and they're like, I want a video chat with that person. I just have to question that type. Like, are they allowed within 500 feet of a school? Have they been convicted of anything? And if not, when are they expected to be caught by the police? There are so many problems. And Jesus Christ, I'm not looking forward to the sheer number of news stories that are going to come out about the grooming that will take place on Roblox. And the number of people who are going to get caught talking to minors and saying like, hey, I want to talk to you on on video chat. Just create a new account, tell them you're over 17, and then we'll chat. Or the number of people who will try to claim to the authorities, the number of Roblox YouTubers who are adult Roblox YouTubers who are gonna get arrested over the next few years for meeting up, for claiming, Your Honor, I thought that the account was flagged as 17 plus. How was I supposed to know that they were 8? The number of people who are going to get arrested over the next 5 years, I think, is going to skyrocket in the YouTube streamer community, because I already have questions about the type of person who streams Roblox as an adult. And if you look at the Roblox streaming community, a lot of them are like, they're people you wouldn't leave in a room with your child. Just, from looking at them. And goddamn, the idea of putting video chat and company approved dating services in Roblox. It's so greasy and so disgusting. And like I said, I usually don't try to take moral stances on video game stuff, but how did anyone see this announcement being taken positively by anyone other than investors and the shills at VentureBeat? Because, oh, good Lord. I don't even know. How much more can you possibly have to say about that? It's so gross. And I really just kind of hope Roblox collapses between child labor exploitation, the fact that the company seems to make money hand over fist and yet lose it at a huge rate. I'm really hoping that this whole venture just collapses long before they have the ability to just facilitate and turn Roblox into more of a child grooming center than it already is. You know, shut it all down, have the adult Roblox creeps go somewhere else. But good Lord, someone said, what our platform of child exploitation needs to make it a lot easier for pedophiles to reach children, and claim that they thought that they were talking to adults. Boy, my God, this shit needs to be shut down. But that's enough about that. And I wanted to get into a couple of things before I wrap up. And it has to do with recent acquisitions and announcements of sunsetting. Now, you may notice I'm going to talk about two games at once because they both fall into the same category. Space Punks and Ring of Elysium, both of which have announced that they're shutting down. Now, Space Punks I've talked about before. Ring of Elysium I've kind of talked about before. But both of these games fall into that trap of the developer abandoned development long before the announcement of the shutdown came. And for neither of these titles, the announcement was particularly surprising. Like, Space Punks hadn't received an update since February. We had the problems recently with Embracer Group shutting down a bunch of studios. And Ring of Elysium, I don't think has had substantial updates in probably a couple years now. So nobody was really surprised that the games that were abandoned a while ago are shutting down. Are they disappointed? Sure. Surprised? No. Now, on the other end, I did want to talk about Crafton, and I wanted to talk about Dark and Darker. Dark and Darker being a game that I haven't personally played. I'm not a fan of the extraction genre, but the developers, Iron Mace, have been in a lot of trouble over the last couple years because they're getting sued in criminal court by Nexon, who claim that Dark and Darker is a stolen concept from a canceled Nexon game, and that the developers behind Dark and Darker are ex-Nexon employees. Now, before we get into that, I just want to say that Nexon's allegations are 100% true. Dark and Darker was a concept taken from a Nexon game. The developers were ex-Nexon employees. Personally, I don't care because Nexon canceled the game and has no monetary interest in it, and I think that developers should not be allowed to legally shut down a game, shut down a project, and then own that concept. Very simply. I think that if Nexon shut down the company, well, Nexon shut down the developer, they shut down production on the game, they shuffled developers over to other projects. I don't think that there should be anything illegal about the developers then going off on their own, finding a sponsor who will fund the game and developing it themselves. But that's a whole different can of worms. And I think that there's more of a whether or not the Korean lawsuit goes anywhere, I think that there's a show of faith in Iron Mace in the fact that we learn that Krafton has paid them a good sum of money, presumably, to develop a mobile version of Dark and Darker. I mean, I think that's pretty cool. I won't play it because it's a mobile game, but the fact that a third-party company is coming in and hopefully providing the money needed to keep Iron Mace alive, I really hope that Dark and Darker sees release on PC, and I hope it does fine on mobile. I don't really care about that. But I hope that the PC version comes out and lives a long life. It's currently in early access. You can currently only buy it from the developer's website, and hopefully it becomes available on Steam again, and they can put all this behind them. Because like I said, I don't really care if the company stole the concept from Nexon. I don't think that Nexon should have the ability to stop another developer from making a similar game because they have no monetary interest in it. If you want to hold ownership of the game, it's like a trademark. If you want to hold ownership of the concept, make the game. But if you are going to cancel it and have no monetary interest, shut up. Don't be mad that other developers are doing what you do not want to do. And that's pretty much everything I have for today. Now, we talked about RuneScape, we talked about the Epic Game Store, talked about Roblox, and we talked about games shutting down and stuff working up. Now, hopefully around the time the next episode of this releases in 2045, I'll have a full hour dedicated with more stuff prepped, and I want to do some more regular columns for the podcast. But this is just kind of me getting my feet wet again. I know it's been a while. I didn't even want to address it at the beginning because we all know how that goes. But just a reminder, this website, the podcast is the official podcast of MMOFallout.com. Check me out, patreon.com/MMOFallout. Maybe I could get better audio equipment with the bigger Patreon budget. I don't know. It all goes into the website hosting at this time. But check us out. New episodes, I don't know. Hit the music.